The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of ParaX, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Step outside of your comfort zone. See the world with a whole new perspective. Join us and experience the unexplained on the Paranormal View.
And welcome everybody right here to the Paranormal View on the ParaX Radio Network. I want to thank everyone for being with us tonight. Those in the chat room and those listening from around the world, we appreciate each and every one. And welcome to another new year here on ParaX for the Paranormal View. It's our first live show of the year, and hopefully many, many more to come. And we got a great show lined up for tonight. And with that, we have with us Barbara Duncan.
Hello, everyone.
And we have Jeffrey Gould.
Hello, hello. Happy New Year.
All right. And, 2020 wasn't a good year, really. And so far...
1 star, would not recommend.
Yeah, so far 2021 had some problems, but I think it's all going to get straightened out, and it's going to turn around if we can get rid of this COVID sometime this year, and we'll be doing good again. So we just have to hang in and do the right things, and we'll be good to go. So you got anything to add, Barbara?
Not really.
Not
Hopefully, the worst of it will be over at the end of the month. But
yeah. And we have.
We'll see.
Jeff, you got anything to say real quick?
Well, I just sent in a self-tape audition for a principal gig on a project for which I'm already booked as background, so that could be interesting. If I get booked for the principal.
Yeah, I keep seeing you posting reviews all the time and winning awards still. So that's doing good.
Well, yeah, I've been submitting my short scripts to different competitions, and so far all that I've been submitting have at least won 2 or 3 awards as best scripts. So yay! Now I just need money to make them.
That's good. Well, why don't you introduce our first guest for the year?
Yes, of the decade, actually. It's
well, yeah,
decade,
it is, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Our returning guest tonight is author Don Allison, a recipient of numerous Associated Press and United Press International awards for his news, features, and column writing. He got his start in journalism in high school as a sports writer and photographer. He's written extensively on the war between the states, drawing on knowledge gained from a lifetime of study of that conflict. He's the co-founder of Faded Banner Publications, which publishes books on the war between the states and the Northwest Ohio history, with both of which are available on Amazon and their own site, fadedbanner.com. So welcome back, Don Allison. Yay! Happy New Year.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, we was just saying that there's a lot of people that's actually staying home and not getting out, and you're one of those also. So
yeah, I'm spending more time at home than I ever dreamed I would be. I usually do a fair amount of travel, doing shows, conferences, that sort of thing, book signings, but those are almost all by the wayside right now. Cannot wait for COVID to be gotten under control.
Well, I know you're the author of I Met a Ghost in Gettysburg, and I Met More Ghosts in Gettysburg. The first time I met you, we were at an event at the David Stewart Farm, and that's where I bought your book, I Met a Ghost in Gettysburg. And from that time on, it seems like every time we get to go to Gettysburg, you get to come, and you bring your wife also.
Yes, that's a highlight of the year. I always enjoy that. I get to go to Gettysburg usually half dozen or more times a year, but that trip's always a highlight. You get to investigate some interesting places and good company to boot.
Now, you, I guess, right to start with, before you bought your house that you live in now, did you have any paranormal experiences or anything happen to you?
Well, I did, but I did not appreciate them for what they were. It really took starting to restore our house and having things happen very regularly that we couldn't explain that really got my attention and introduced me into this field.
So you didn't have anything going on before you moved into the house?
Not really. I did have something really strange happen, and this was years before we bought the house, but I couldn't explain it, and it always stuck with me. But I, on my way to cover a meeting for the newspaper, I drove right by this house. I've always been interested in the house, but it was in pretty rough shape. But I happened to notice that there was a little hill in front of the house, and a car coming toward me in the other lane kind of popped up the top of the hill, and I thought, I never noticed that before. Well, later that evening on my return trip, I rounded a curve not too far from the house, and all of a sudden I had this sense to slow down, and I couldn't explain it. It wasn't a voice. It was just I knew to slow down. And I slowed from probably 60 to maybe 35, and I got to that hill in front of this house, and somebody was passing on the hill. Had I not slowed down, I would certainly have had a head-on collision at a high rate of speed. For all I know, that saved my life. I was shaking after that happened. When I got home, Diane, my wife, was like, wow, when I told her what happened. And that has stayed with me. And I often think of that now that I'm living here and have owned the house for a while.
Cool. It's always interesting when the universe does stuff like that. One of my first metaphysical teachers conveyed a story where he was driving home and he felt essentially the universe saying, turn left here. And he's like, why? That's not where I'm going. And he kept saying, just turn left up ahead. And he just eventually no, I need to go straight. And he got pulled over. But he said that the interesting thing would have blown his mind is if he had turned left, he would have never known why.
Probably has stuck with him all this time.
Well, I taught him to learn to listen to the inner workings of the universe when they tell him to do something.
Yeah, and at the time I did not know what to think of that occurrence. But boy, looking back at it, I've learned a lot, and I appreciate. Yeah, there are indeed forces there that we should tap into.
Well, you know who Frank Baum was, right?
Frank,
the author of the original. He wrote the books of the Wizard of Oz.
Oh yes, okay, I know who you mean. Yeah.
Well, in the late 1800s, he was on a train, and he was going to a certain specific stop, and it was a night train. He fell asleep, and all of a sudden, he gets woken up by what he presumes is the conductor yelling the name of the stop in his face, and he's like, "Oh, I have to get off." Oh my God, I don't want to get stuck on the train. And he immediately hops off the train. The train takes off, and he's like, middle of nowhere. He's in a way station, in the middle of nowhere. And he goes to the station manager. He goes, "What is this such and such a stop?" He says, "No, that's like one or two stops down the line." He says, "Somebody just woke me up and told me to get off." And then the wireless goes off, and the train that Baum had just gotten off of had derailed off the tracks and had gone into the river.
Wow. That's pretty interesting. Things like that
He would
do
not
happen.
have had the Wizard of Oz if he had not happened.
Yeah.
World would have really lost something had that been the case.
So I want to let everybody know if you do have questions for Don, you can private chat them either to Ceiling Cat or myself, and we will get those over to him to be answered. Also, when you moved into your house, as you said, things started happening in the house. Now, when you first moved in, did you have your parrot with you, or did that come later?
No, we did have our parrot. He was a young parrot. The parrot we had before had passed, so he was a young, kind of feisty parrot when we moved in. And he does often react to things that you cannot see, but he reacts exactly as he reacts to people. And he'll play peekaboo with a non-existent entity or just start talking, obviously looking right at something that we don't see. The one time it was so obvious that he had jumped over to the back of a chair, recliner, was looking into the dining room through the door from the living room, and he started playing peekaboo, and he'll actually go pika and expect you to go boo. And if you don't do that, he won't continue the game. He continued the game for several cycles. I walked into the room, got him on my shoulder, walked into the room. He was focused on a corner. I went to that corner, and it was very, very cold, much, much colder than the rest of the room.
Wow.
I could not see anything, but he was intent looking at that corner.
So since COVID and you're spending a lot more time in the house, have you noticed if the activity has picked up much with you having to stay there?
It comes and goes. Now, it's been quite active lately. What we've been getting lately, and we'll get different things, but lately it's been things coming on. Electronic devices turning on their own. We were doing some work. We have one room that's not finished. And we've used it sort of for storage. It's my library, and we've had, I've got books stored there and so forth, but we were cleaning it out. We go out to the dining room, and the shredder beside my wife's desk turned on. And this has never happened before, and we're just looking at each other like, what the heck? But we have, for a while, the radio in the kitchen off the dining room was coming on by itself. That was one of the things that happened from the word go when I started working on the house that really, really intrigued us. But what's another thing that happened? I have a little Charlie Brown decorative Christmas tree that I put in my office. My office is quite active. And it has one single glass bulb that hangs from the top. The tree droops just like the Charlie Brown special. And that had a wire hanger, and I wrapped that hanger pretty tight around that tree so it wasn't going to fall off. You could bump it. It wasn't going to move. And I'm walking out of the office. I'm 3 or 4 feet away from it, and it came off the tree and smashed on the floor and shattered. Just yesterday, I have a full spectrum light on my desk. I tend to kind of crave sunlight during these dark months, and this light will occasionally turn on or off by itself. It's just, those things are just, it's just incredible how much we get that sort of thing.
Now, regarding the paper shredder, was that one that you turn on and it just runs and you put the paper in? Or does it only turn on when you're putting paper into it?
It turns on when the paper is inserted, and there was nothing in it.
That's what makes it cool.
Yeah, we weren't even near it. Yeah, we actually were a room over, and we were like, "What in the world is that?" when we heard the noise. But it's just like our remote control for the television. If you move it, it will light up. So you can use it in the dark. It will light up on its own without being touched or moved. One thing, two things.
I don't think you can knock that into static electricity, but yeah.
Yeah, one thing or two things here or there, but just the sheer volume of it. Now, I may have told you on the show, and I'm pretty sure I have it in my first book, I met a ghost in Gettysburg, but my wife and I were working outside. This was long before we moved in. We had just taken possession of the house, and we had a radio playing. As we were working on tuck pointing bricks and cleaning that up, and the radio changed by itself to a Bowling Green State University basketball game, men's basketball game. We switched it back. It went back to the game within like 30 seconds. We tried like a dozen times putting it on different stations, and it always returned to the BGSU men's basketball game, which I found rather insulting because I'm a University of Toledo graduate and they are the arch rivals of Bowling Green. But once that basketball game was over, then it would stay on our station. Just, how do you explain that?
Hey, when you're a ghost and you've got money on a game, you got to listen to it.
And it does seem that there's a spirit that is a sports fan, because radios will come on, and when we were working like evenings and so forth, I would come out more than one occasion. Radio would be on that I had turned off before I left, and it often would be on a Cleveland Indians baseball game. I'm not a Cleveland Indians fan, and I don't listen to that station. So not only was the radio coming on, but it was changing to a different station. I mean, these things are just strange. and I'll tell you, that played with my head when those things first started happening. I thought I was losing my mind at the time.
Don, do you have
You can work out a psychological profile right now of your ghost. You know what their likes and dislikes are.
Actually, rock music tends to irritate the one that likes to hang out in my office, especially. I've had, playing rock music, I've had books thrown off a bookshelf. I actually had a clock that sits on my desk. It's probably 5 inches across. It's fairly heavy. It's metal. That actually got thrown onto the floor from my desk once. That one rather irritated me. I yelled like, "Don't do that. Don't be messing with my stuff." Keep throwing things. Yeah, I had a mug tossed off my shelf and broken. And the only catalyst I can see is the rock music.
the rock music?
I sometimes play it loud, and I sometimes like some rather heavy rock at times. Classic rock. But
Have you got
living creatures in their heavy metal music.
I think this seems to be a country guy. If I play some old Hank Williams, he won't mess with it.
Have you got a headset on with a microphone attached?
Yes, I do.
You need to have the microphone up towards your mouth a little bit more, because...
Oh, yeah, it did slip away, yeah. Is that better?
Yeah, that's a little better. Because you'd be talking, and it'd be like you was talking from across the room or something.
Or on a telephone.
So, the... When you moved into the house and found out that there was things in there, have you figured out roughly how many different spirits you have in the house?
Well, we know for sure that there is a male spirit we sometimes will hear footsteps, and we hear different footsteps. One of them sounds like a rather heavy gentleman wearing leather boots. I'm familiar with that sound because I do living history. And one time, actually, I was working in my office. This was right after we moved in, and I heard steps coming down the hallway, and no one else was in the house with me. I hollered out. The steps stopped. I looked in the hallway. Nothing's there. I came back to my computer, sat down. The steps resumed, and these were the heavy leather-soled boot steps. The steps went right beside me, and the lamp on my desk, when the steps passed between me and the lamp, there was actually the shadow of a large, looked like a man's figure on the wall, but yet I could see nothing. The steps continued into the adjoining room and stopped in the middle of the room, and that was that. We often hear what sounds like a barefoot child footsteps. Those generally are upstairs, and we have had people see apparitions of a young girl. Another one that seems we've had people see apparitions of what seems to be a Victorian young woman. And I have actually heard not with any electronic devices, but heard with my own ear of what sounded like a female voice.
I'm curious because you're a columnist. And you write other types of books. I'm wondering if you ever considered adapting some of these ghosts into a novel.
I've toyed with that idea. I have not written any fiction since college, but I have actually toyed with that very idea. I've toyed with the idea of historical fiction as well, but so far I've stuck to the nonfiction, and really the real ghosts and just the real occurrences have kept me pretty busy.
And they haven't attempted to communicate with you verbally or give you any sort of documentation as to who they are or why they're there?
Not the ones in the house. I will say that I have not really investigated the house. One rare occasion I did use an Ovilus type program, and that was the time that Rusty, our parrot, was playing peekaboo with something in the living room, and I took that app in there. And actually, is anyone here? And I forget, I got a couple words, and then, well, who are you? And I got the word Nathan.
Wow.
And then I said, what's your last name? I think it was Andrews. I have it written down. But I thought, that is intriguing. And I could just feel the energy, and it was cold in the corner. But I have researched, and I have found nobody by that name with any connection to the house. I don't know if that is perhaps something that maybe there was an accident. We do have a U.S. highway in front of the house. If there's a connection there, maybe an accident or something, but I really have no idea.
So, in investigating or researching, I should say, the house, how old is it and how far back does the owner go?
Well, it was built around 1835 by a gentleman named John Perkins, who was very interesting. He was a War of 1812 veteran. He was one of the first circuit judges in Old Williams County, which was much larger than what the county is today. If you've ever heard of Fort Defiance, he actually came to Northwest Ohio up the Maumee River and lived in the old fort as this area was first being settled. But he founded a little town just about a half mile from here, and then built a cabin there, then built this house. And he died in the house in 46, so we know who all the owners were. We know quite a bit about the house, actually. There were 4 Civil War soldiers who grew up in the house by the last name of Miller. 2 of those did not make it home from the war. And it has Underground Railroad connections, which I find fascinating as well.
So when you first moved in, you had to just about completely renovate the whole house.
Yeah, Diane's sitting here behind me going, oh, yeah. I think some folks thought we had lost our minds. I have one of my best friends after we moved in and he saw what we'd done with the house. He was amazed. He said that he thought we'd lost our minds buying it. But and I'm not exaggerating. You could stand in the basement and see sky coming through. And it's a 2-story house plus a basement.
So a real fixer-upper.
Yeah, truly. We didn't know if it could be safe. Fortunately, it was built really well. We had 3 different contractors come in, give us estimates. You know, we asked for high and low, what it would need, and then we crunched the numbers. And fortunately, we were able to do it.
Well, you just about had to tear everything out and start all over, didn't you?
Well, actually, we tried to save everything we could so that we're actually restoring as much as anything, and things that we couldn't restore, we tried to get period original architectural salvage pieces to complete. Fortunately, all the doors, windows, door hardware, trim, interior trim, and so forth, we've been able to save. We had to redo our master bedroom floor upstairs. Was totally gone from water damage, about 1/3 of the living room below it. But fortunately, there was a barn that was on the original family plot. It isn't on what we own, but it was coming down, and it was using the same wood. It was built with the same wood from the same forest that this house was built with. So we actually have flooring that you cannot tell is not original to the house. It was actually haymow flooring from the barn.
Oh, nice. And so by restoring it, you think, I know that there is a theory that when you start doing renovations to a house and the ghost doesn't like it, you start to get more paranormal activity. Do you think you're actually a welcome addition to the house because you are restoring it so well?
I think we are, and what I have noticed is when we start something new, a new project, a new part, the uptick in paranormal activity can be pretty intense, actually. A good example of the kind of thing we get is I installed a sliding door between my office and the laundry room, which was originally a mud room. By having the sliding door, I have more space. As I started to put up the track for this door, and we've got a probably 1870s, very nice solid wood door. Every battery for my electric or my battery powered drill went dead immediately as I started to use them. Huh. Every single battery. I have like 3 electric drills, and I have duplicate batteries for a couple of them. Every one of those batteries went dead. I had to use a plug-in drill.
Wow.
That's happened on other projects, but that was the kind of dramatic thing. The first day after the door was restored, I was working in my office. I went to the other side of the house to have lunch. I came back, and this door was closed. And this is a heavy door, and it takes a fair amount of effort to close it. And this happened 3 days in a row. The 3rd day after it happened, I came in, sat down at my computer, turned on some music, and that's when some books were thrown off the bookshelf.
Well, do you think?
Apparently, He's okay with the door now.
Oh, he's okay now, huh? Well, do you think they like you restoring the house? I mean, they see that you're actually fixing it up. And if they love the house, you would think that they would encourage you to do more.
And actually, the vibes in the house are really good. That's one of the reasons, actually, we bought it. I'd watched the house for most of my life and watched it go downhill. It's much different style and much older than most houses in this area. We're in the Great Black Swamp, so our area was settled a bit later for the most part. But yeah, the vibes are good but there are exceptions. The most, and I'd almost forgotten about this, Diane just mentioned it to me. We have what is our bathroom was a bedroom off the living room, and when I was getting that ready, I installed the toilet myself, and the toilet was in a box in the living room, and as I was prepping for that, I could hear footsteps walking back and forth in the living room, which is not uncommon when I was doing work before we moved in, and I could hear shuffling I had a workbench set up. I could hear shuffling there. When I picked up the toilet, brought it into the room, all of a sudden I heard steps, the footsteps, intensify. Things were rattled somewhat violently on the workbench, and the steps came into the room. I was standing in the doorway, and I actually felt the energy of whatever this was pass through me. It was a very intense, very unforgettable feeling. The steps continued into the room and then stopped, and that was the end of the activity for the night. Now, a gentleman who lived in the house before we bought it, he told us it was haunted. I bit my tongue and tried not to make fun of him when he first told us that, but I soon came to agree. But he told us he thought the ghost was Uncle Bill, and actually that bathroom was Uncle Bill's bedroom.
Huh.
And he actually died in that room, I think in 1946 or 8.
Wow.
So he owned the residence quite a long time then, and it was his uncle?
The gentleman that lived here was a renter, and he wasn't related, but the Uncle Bill would have been a great uncle to the brothers that we bought the house from. Okay. And I don't think he was born in the house, but he lived here a good share of his life. And actually, we found some things in the spare bedroom, some clothing and so forth that we believe may have been his.
Did you find anything on the walls, by the way?
Not in the walls. We found some, booze bottles, but that
booze bottles.
The guy who rented the place for 20-some years, who told us it was haunted. Actually, I had to bite my tongue when he first told us some of his experiences to say, well, that explains the half-empty booze bottles that we find stashed everywhere. But now we found just a lot of carpenter's tools. One of the family that had the house, and I'm drawing a blank as to their name. That's terrible. Ames, the Ames family, Nathaniel Ames, who bought the house in 1869 and did an addition at that time. He was a carpenter, built a lot of the buildings and structures around here. We found a lot of carpenter's tools buried in the yard. I have found some of them in the basement, like stashed odd places. The weirdest thing that we have found was the barrel to a flintlock pistol. It looks to be a military flintlock pistol, about a .36 caliber, and it's just the pistol, no stock or anything else to it. I'd like to know maybe what the story is to that, but it was just kind of almost hidden under things underneath the window in our basement.
It's something
I always wondered about those houses because you always hear of people buying these old Victorians, etc., and going to the attic and finding all sorts of stuff stashed behind wood beams, etc. Those little tiny rooms that you normally use up in the attic, I guess, as venting rooms for heat, but somehow they become collecting bins.
Yeah, our house actually does not have an attic.
Really?
It has not exactly a flat roof. It is sloped, but it's kind of rounded. But the basement is very interesting. It's the original 1835 kitchen. It has the cooking hearth, and it's never had anything done to it. It's actually quite amazing.
Really?
Wow, that would be neat.
I suppose
That
it
was
had.
the biggest selling thing of the house to me.
Did it have a chimney that went all the way up with that?
Yes, and there was no reaching it from inside the house. You had to go outdoors. It actually has an outside entrance. There is a set of stairs that was installed later, but it's a very poor set. And we salvaged some beautiful stairs from an 1870s house we're going to install. And that'll be more like kind of just a family room, kind of a hangout, perhaps. We really haven't done anything with it. We're kind of using it for storage till we're totally done.
Well,
Does the cooking fireplace still operational?
It has never been lined, so I would be hesitant to use it, but we have talked about having it lined.
Wow.
To be able to use it.
Well, is the basement floor dirt, or did they put concrete down?
It is brick, and at one point they covered it in concrete, but it's a very, very poor concrete, and you can peel it right off. The floor is a little bit uneven. It has kind of a funky design to it, what we've uncovered so far. What I plan to do is just work in like 3-foot squares and just lift the bricks up carefully, keep them in order, then even out the sand base and then replace them. So eventually the floor will be nice and even.
That'll look really neat.
So I know. Go ahead, Barbara.
No, I was just thinking a brick floor down there. That would be an awesome room.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the basements and stuff in Gettysburg was that way.
Yes, actually the houses in the eastern part of the U.S., like Gettysburg, remind me a lot of our house.
Well, I guess as you put the kitchen in the basement, because if you're cooking all day, it would heat the rest of the house up.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and by not having a staircase going up in the summer, you're not letting the heat directly in.
That makes sense.
Yeah, but the house was originally heated, the original part of the house, by 2 fireplaces. That fireplace and one in the great room, which is now our living room.
Wow.
But that fireplace was taken out when they did an addition. They added a dining room and another upstairs bedroom, and then what's now the kitchen actually was a porch, semi-enclosed porch that around 1900 they closed that in and made a galley kitchen out of it.
Wow. Sounds like it's really gone through a lot of renovation before you even got to it. So
for the most part, nothing since 1900. The 1869 addition blends in well. They did put a big porch on at that time. Fortunately, we have a photograph of the family standing in front of the house right after they did the addition. So we were able to use that to restore the house to its 1869 appearance. The porch most of it was gone when we bought the house. They had just put a very small porch on it, but luckily the original decorative columns, were all in the barn. So we were able to restore those and restore the porch.
Patsy wanted to know that if we can move into the basement if we promise to stay when we are ghosts.
Sure. And actually, the basement, that part of the basement, the large kitchen room, is not terribly active, but there's a second room off of that is highly active. It's in the middle of the house, what would have been actually one end of the house before the addition. The addition just has a kind of a tall crawl space.
So you knew that by the man that used to live there telling you that the place was haunted before you moved in. Did you do any research on the house on that count before you moved in?
I didn't research the hauntings, but fortunately, I do a lot of local historic research, and between talking with the family that we bought it from, they had owned it. They were descendants of the Ames family. They had been in their family since 1869. I did some research on my own, and then a research librarian in Bryan gave me a call one day and said she had a file on my house. It seems that in the early 1980s, the Ohio Historical Society went into each county in Ohio, and local officials recommended structures to research, and this house was one that was recommended for that. So they had researched the history, when it was built. A lot of things about the house were just handed to me in that file.
So I know we usually do trips and stuff to Gettysburg, and you usually come too. Before Diane started coming with you, when you would go to Gettysburg or some of these other places, and she stayed at the house, did she ever experience things while you were gone?
Yeah, she has. And she's sitting back here. I can ask her if anything comes to mind. One that does come to mind is she was upstairs, I believe it was getting ready to go to work, and a picture of her parents was on a hinged frame, and also her late father's pewter beer mug were flung off the dresser onto the floor. She wasn't even near them. These are two heavy items.
Huh.
Oh, she said the picture actually went back against the wall, the pewter mug forward. It was almost like somebody had their hand and just, swiped. And I've had similar experiences here in my office. And another one, and that involved the bird. I had gone to bed one evening before she did, just about 10 minutes before, and I was reading in bed, and I heard footsteps downstairs. It sounded like they were in the dining room, and I didn't hear anything more. That's not all that uncommon. But the next morning, Diane was telling me that after I'd gone to bed, she was sitting watching TV in the living room, and the bird, Rusty, started going berserk in his cage, kind of squawking and flapping, and he just does not do this, especially late at night. Diane looked over, and coming in the doorway from the living room, or from the dining room to the living room, she said was a shadow, almost like smoky black, about the shape and size of a person's torso. No head, no feet, just like the torso. And she saw that, so she wanted to mute the TV. So she's trying to find the mute button, mute the TV. She looks back, and it was gone. And Rusty, the bird, immediately settled down. But when she told me about that the next day, I asked her when it happened, and it was exactly when I heard the footsteps walking across the dining room.
There seems to be a lot of static right now coming from your microphone, I'm sure. Do you think that the spirits, because we're talking about them, is messing with it?
That would not be uncommon, Henry. I've actually just had my computer go bonkers when I was being interviewed and talking about some of the activity.
Huh. Well, tell them that we're talking about them in a nice form, not in a bad form.
Yes, I hope they heard you. And yeah, just you guys behave.
I was going to ask if you knew that the house had ghosts. Have you ever had a psychic group or a paranormal investigation group come through to see what they've come up with?
No, and my philosophy has always been I don't want to cause trouble. We have a very healthy relationship, coexistence maybe is a better word. And the very few things that I've ever done is I had told you about using the Ovilus app to get the name, and I also used dowsing rods once, and actually did get answers to who I thought one of the spirits was, and I didn't do that very long. I put them away, and I've had a lot of people advise us not to. Diane was saying, and I tend to agree with that since we live here.
Well, I know you have recorders and equipment, but you've never actually tried to use those and talk with the spirits.
No. A good example of how things work here, this was before we moved in. We had a break-in. Somebody broke in, stole a number of tools, pretty valuable tools, and brass antique ceiling, chandeliers, and so forth that we'd had rewired, were ready to hang. And apparently something spooked whoever it was, because there was like in the middle of the dining room, it was like somebody dropped an armload of tools and valuable items. And you could see the tracks. They parked the car actually in the yard behind the house, and you could see tracks. It looked like almost somebody burned out, went straight across the yard and didn't even bother to use the driveway. They went down into the small ditch and up through. The sheriff's detective that investigated thought because they knew there were things here of value that they'd left behind, they even thought that maybe our ghost scared them away because they had experiences here, but maybe that's another story. But they put in what's called a Varda alarm. It is a motion detector that if something is in the house, it would sound an alarm for them, and they can dispatch deputies. I think the Varda alarm was in the house 3 days, and it went off something like 6 or 7 times.
Really?
And they made sure to move it, so it was a place where it couldn't possibly be car lights or a mouse, or it would have had to have been a human or a raccoon. It had to have been like a human-sized, something human-sized moving in the field of that thing to set it off. And they took it away, and they said they'd never had that happen. The one deputy really freaked out because they would come out and their radios would die. We had because it had been broken into, they put us on a regular check. They would check it several times a week, and there was one deputy who was scared to death and wouldn't even get out of his car at the house. Yeah, the flashlight batteries would go dead, their radios would go dead, they would hear things.
Wow. So with other people, it seems to be pretty active, somebody coming in.
And yeah, like people doing work stirs things up. I warned, we had some contractors out in December doing some work on our Yankee gutter, and there was an Amish group. They're kind of interesting, but I warned them if odd things happen, don't be surprised. They were quite intrigued, but I've actually had contractors angry at me that I didn't warn them because they've had batteries go dead. One gentleman was on a step ladder, and somebody tugged. He thought it was one of his coworkers, tugged on his flannel shirt tail, like to get his attention. And he looked down, and nobody was there, and he flipped out. He was upset with his boss for not telling, and he jumped me when I came out that evening. And was very mad that I didn't warn him.
Huh. Take it and move your microphone around and check the plug. Make sure it's into your computer good.
Everything is pretty solid. I've never had problems with the mic before.
I can't hardly hear you now.
Really at all?
Yeah, very low. Sound like you're real far
Sounds
away.
like you're outside.
Let me turn it up here.
Okay, Don's working on his microphone right at the present moment. So, interesting though. I mean,
Yeah, it was turned way down on its own. Is that better?
that is a lot better.
Yeah, it was turned down to about maybe 25%,
That's
and I had it set at about 75.
wow. Well, it sounds a lot better right now. So,
Yeah, that's what it was.
okay.
Yeah, on the Skype microphone setting, it was down to about 25%.
Well, that sounds a lot better there.
Yeah, and actually, we believe that that one of the spirits here in the house is a former owner. His name was Henry Miller, and
The author?
his wife Margaret. They had the house for a few years, and they both died here during the Civil War. Apparently of a fever, not too far apart time-wise, and they had 4 sons in the service, or 3 in the service at the time. A 4th joined after they died, but we think 2 of the spirits are them. We hear a woman in long, you can hear the dress even swish. We'll hear a woman's footsteps and hear a swishing dress, and we think a gentleman who sometimes gets a little irascible, throwing stuff around, is Henry Miller.
Yeah, not me.
Not you. Although you are welcome to use our basement later on.
Wow. Pretty interesting, though.
And another spirit, there's a little girl, her apparition has been seen, and we hear footsteps. They're always upstairs. They sound like a child's bare feet, kind of almost a pitter patter. Sometimes almost running, other times slower. But the apparition of a young girl has been seen. And I researched that, and there is a young girl who did not live in the house, but her grandparents lived here. And she died in like 1882. She was maybe 7 years old and died of a horrible case of bone cancer. She didn't live here, but she would obviously have spent time here. She lived about a mile away with her parents. And we suspect it may be her. Her name's Annabelle. She tends to be playful. She loves to play. My wife has a necklace stand on a dresser in the bedroom. It will actually physically see those necklaces move, like something's playing with them, and you can hear them. And one actually has a small bell on it, and it actually will tinkle. And we cannot debunk that. We can't figure there's no air currents, house isn't shaking or moving. It's a very solid brick house. So.
Yeah, I've seen.
Well, you figure that in a community like that, especially a long time ago, they would not know to go anywhere else. They would be within their own little realm world right there. So if the house was interesting for them, that they would figure that would be a place they could hang out.
Yeah, if at least if her experience was like mine, I loved my grandparents' homes as a child and always felt safe and welcome there.
And you haven't caught him playing with anything and telling him to stop.
We have another spirit who's very playful, and he's a prankster. He loves to hide things. We think he's the one who actually touches people. I've been touched on more than one occasion. My grandson's been touched. But, for instance, one time I came out to do some work on the house, again, before we moved in, opened up the drawer of my workbench, and all my straight-slotted screwdrivers were gone. None of the Phillips. Those weren't touched, but every straight-slotted screwdriver was missing. Over a period of months, I found them stashed in odd places, out-of-the-way places. One time I came out and I was doing plastering. I was using latex gloves to keep my hands from drying out. And I came out and the box of those gloves was gone. And I had a box of very loose-fitting plastic gloves that I did not like. And so I think it might have been the first time I ever spoke out loud to the hauntings. I said, look, don't take my gloves. I need these gloves. I don't like these other gloves. Bring back my gloves. So I used them. Come out the next night, the box of latex gloves was returned to the table, and the box of loose-fitting gloves was gone, and I never, to this day, have found that box.
They listen to you, don't they?
Yeah, it's like, and in that period, this is before I'd written any books. I would share with close friends. I started talking to some people at work, and my newspaper, cohorts are all saying, you need to write about this. This is wild. You need to write about this. So that was kind of really the impetus of what got the I Met a Ghost in Gettysburg book to be.
But you did meet a ghost at Gettysburg, and that was why you wrote. You had all about your house in that book.
Yeah, and that's where the title of the book came from, was an experience at Gettysburg at Sachs Bridge. And I think I've discussed that on your show before, but that was just incredible. It was an investigation, but it was a touristy thing. I had my grandson there with me, and I'd registered as a journalist with Destination Gettysburg, their marketing group. So I was set up with some certain things that I could do, and one of them was a free ghost investigation. And it was just a young lady, my grandson, and I, and we had different equipment. We had digital recorders, we had K2 meters, and SB7 spirit box to get real-time EVPs. And it was with that spirit box that we actually spoke with an entity that gave us a name that checked out. It was a captain who died at Gettysburg. And he even told us, Captain, an age. He gave us his name. That I thought it was a hoax until I got home and researched it. And that impressed me so much that that's where the title of the book indeed came from.
And none of the ghosts there have ever followed you home, have they?
Not that I am aware of. I have never felt any threats from any of the experiences I've had at Gettysburg. And Diane reminded me, using dowsing rods, my dad accompanied me back to Gettysburg later, and he suggested using the dowsing rods. I've never gotten the soldier to come through. Malin Briggs is his name. I've never gotten him to come through again on the spirit box, but with dowsing rods, I have twice communicated with him. He verified some very interesting things, and I have to thank my dad for thinking of doing that.
Wow.
So you use them as a yes/no sort of thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And I tend to, for instance, the way I approach it is I will ask things if I do know what the answer should be. I will often ask in a way so that it's kind of a test. Like with Malin Briggs, I knew from the Army records that he had been wounded in the hip. So I'm asking him, were you hurt? Yes. Were you injured? Yes. Where were you hurt? Were you wounded in the head, and the shoulder, and the arm? And no response, no response. I said in the hip, and I got no response, which rather surprised me. I thought, well, maybe he's done with us. And then I said in the leg, and I got a yes. So I think, well, maybe he was wounded high on the leg, and they considered that the hip. But things like, I asked him, did the Confederates treat you well? He was a POW when he died, and the answer was yes.
Pretty interesting.
Have you ever tried the dowsing pendulum?
I have. I haven't used it much, and I think I just would need to do some practice with it. I do have one, but I've had such good results with the dowsing rods that I tend to lean toward them.
Well, you must be a dowser at heart then.
I think some people have a knack for it. You have to use them correctly. And it's really weird because, my first experience with them was to find water. Actually, a teacher in high school introduced our class to that. We thought she was nuts, but we were finding water lines going into the school building. I used dowsing rods to find the septic tank at the house. Successfully found it. My son thought I was nuts. I gave them to him, and he couldn't do anything with it, but my grandson found the septic tank. I didn't tell them where it was, but they worked for him and not for my son.
Wow. And you can use them pretty much anything too. You could probably douse for artifacts at the same time.
That's one of the theories. I have not ever had any success finding anything like that with them. Just water and spiritual energy.
All right.
Well, I suppose you could use it in your house too, if Rusty starts talking, and you could walk towards where he's looking and see exactly where the ghost is.
Because
by the rods.
That is one thing with the rods. I have asked on numerous occasions, where are you? And the rods will point to a spot.
Cool. Nice.
Wow. All right, I think we're going to go ahead and take us a quick break because it's already 9 o'clock. It's going by fast. So, Don, just remember your mic will be live, but you aren't going to hear anything till I come back on.
Okay.
And I guess, Jeff, you're going to take us out?
Yep, you're listening to the Paranormal View on power-x.com with hosts Henry Foister, Ceiling Cat Barbara Duncan, and myself, Jeffrey Gould, with our returning guest author, Don Allison. So stay tuned for more of the Paranormal View after the break.